U.S. presidential election on the route to the White House. Well, Indira is staying with me for the next hour as well. We are now joined by the Secretary of Foreign for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Sri Lanka, Admiral Professor Jayanath Columbage, not a stranger to us at all. Welcome to the program, sir. Well, we still don't know who the next president of the United States is, but whatever said and done, what do you think? The approach of Sri Lanka is going to be, whoever comes, whether it's Biden or Trump? Are we going to sign the MCC? Are we going to pander to their request? What's going to happen, sir?
Well, I think no matter who wins the presidential race in America, it may not really impact Sri Lanka, because it's not like in Sri Lanka every time a political change takes place, our policies also change. The people at helm changes. I think in America their policies will continue no matter who comes to the White House or who goes back to the White House. So we have to be ready with whatever the outcome may be for us to think of Sri Lanka rather than playing to the outcome of this election.
I'd also like to ask you whether we can ignore India standing here right next to us.
We can never ignore India, and we should not. And there is no reason for ignoring India. Now, India is a mighty country in the region, the biggest military power, biggest economic power, and we are very close geographically. That's a fact. So we need to benefit from that. We need to benefit from that, but we have to deal with India also, giving them confidence that we would not do anything to harm their strategic security concerns, period. If we try to do that, we can't survive. So that's number one. And then the other thing is, I think again, now economy you mentioned, and you mentioned the China factor. Sri Lanka does not have much choices, and we are not in a position where we can bandwagon with one and say goodbye to the others. We don't have that luxury, right? So we have to deal with every country. Yes, neutrality is one trait. I mean, technically we are a non-aligned country, but we all know the non-aligned concept was created after the end of the World War II, during the Cold War, when the new countries in Asia and Africa were born. So there were two clearly identifiable blocks. Now we don't have that blocks. We have one superpower and then aspiring superpowers or aspiring major powers. So we don't have the luxury of choosing. So therefore, I think President has very clearly stated or reiterated what we are interested is not bandwagoning militarily, strategically with any power, but economic engagement. We need to engage with the whole world, but economically.
Last discussion I had with the Foreign Secretary was on my show at Hyde Park, and we spoke about Sri Lanka moving into the formulation of a written down foreign policy for the first time in Sri Lankan history. And here we're talking about China and the United States at each other. Again, Sri Lanka is here, cushioned in between them. The Belt and Road Initiative, its increasing influence, and US power, maritime power in the region. But how are we looking at this? I'd also like to go back to a question I asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during his visit. What choices the United States wants Sri Lanka to make? And he very directly, he mentioned that Sri Lanka has to choose between democracy and an authoritarian rule. How are we looking at Sri Lanka balancing these requirements from the two superpowers?
So two parts of your question. Number one is, as I mentioned earlier, we must be consistent in our policy. That's one, right? Every time the circumstances change, if we try to change our foreign policy, we are not doing justice to the country. It has happened for the last 72 years, ups and downs, and this is why our country is what we are today, right? Now we need a consistent policy, right? So we should not be really playing to the other players. We should have our own narrative, our own game, our own game plan, right? And then answer to the choices. So I will ask again, what choices do we really have? I mean, we have the America, of course, as you mentioned, we are caught between two major strategies. American-led Indo-Pacific strategy and Chinese-led Belt and Road Initiative. If you look at these two strategies, can we afford to take a side? Can we be part of the IPS and forget the BRI? Or can we go slowly with the BRI and forget everything? No, we can't do that. So what I see in this is, if you take the crux of the Indo-Pacific strategy, they talk about free and open maritime trade, free and open Indian and Pacific Ocean. Now, isn't that our interest too? Because as a country in the center of the Indian Ocean, definitely that is our interest. So without bandwagoning onto the IPS, we can promote the free and open Indian Ocean. We are not a big country to talk about the Pacific Ocean, but we can say free and open Indian Ocean is in our interest. Then look at the other end of the spectrum, that is the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, Belt and Road Initiative is a maritime infrastructure-led initiative. Don't we want that? We want our maritime infrastructure to be top class, developed, and for us to become part of the global value chain, global supply chain. So we don't have, again, the luxury of choosing. We need to benefit from everything we have in this region.
So Mahesh, doesn't this take us also to the question of debt trap, debt enslavement, whether it's China or the United States?
Indeed. And the other thing, Foreign Secretary, let's be a bit realistic. At the end of the day, these countries are going to, expect you to side with them when it comes to a key issue. United States will play their, superpower card, and China will expect us to be, hey, we helped you out in many cases. Why don't you get, start supporting us in case like that, something like that happened, whether they've been taken to the, because there is this notion when COVID-19 pandemic, it'll come to an end at one particular point. And when that happens, there are a lot of Western countries who wants to take action against China because they see China as responsible for pretty much eroding their economies for no reason, because this pandemic came from China, and China's inability to control the pandemic at that particular point, and it went all around the world, is seen as something that they want to get back at, either let them make them to pay back because these economies are struggling. Western economies, the United States economy is taking a massive hit. So it'll come to that point. If it comes to that point, we can't just say we are neutral, because that is, not being realistic. What do you think, for example?
Well, I don't know whether, you see, we are in a globalized economy. So whether it is fair to blame one party for all the ills, I'm not 100% sure. And also stigmatizing the virus to a particular country, again, is not right. Just say, for example, it started in China. Why didn't the world take precautions to prevent it coming to their countries? Why couldn't they control it in their own countries, even if it started in China, as we accuse? So therefore, this punishing a country, now China is not a small country to be pushed around, their economic power, and you see the world economy is quite interlinked. If you try to punish a major economic power, they will also suffer. So this world is quite interlinked. So I don't think it will come to that level of punishing or demanding, and I don't think China is a country which can be pushed around like that. So I think the world has to understand the reality. But then I don't think any country has the right to push us to choose. So we have to be very firm. We have done it quite well in the past.
We were not, if you take the last government, the Yahapalne government, when we were asked to sign for the resolution, which was pretty much, taking a gun and keeping it ahead, that was what happened. And at that moment, we went along with what they asked for us. We pulled the trigger, and we pretty much killed our own country. So that was like, that is also comes down to the fact that the policies are not consistent with every government. It changes, and so what's going to happen at the end of the day? Because we very well know that there's going to be a massive political power play in another 6 months' time, 1 year down the line. It's going to happen.
So again, Mahesh, I reiterate my earlier position. Whatever the previous government has done, now we do see the results, because the people have rejected many of the actions that they did. So there is no point harping on to the same thing and saying we have done something wrong. Yes, we have done something wrong, and the people have spoken. And now we don't have that excuse. Now we have to move forward, right? Now our foreign policy or the way this country moves on should not be limited to 5 years, because this is actually an ironical situation which this democratic cycle has given us. We look at the country in 5 years. Now that is very short time for a country, right? And so if the government is thinking only of the next 5 years, and if they don't want to take any risk during that 5 years thinking that they want to come back, we will be like this forever. So we need to overcome this risk aversion, we need to overcome this short-termism, and we need to look ahead and have our consistent policy to sail through.